Okay, so what you're listening to is this Norns Shield. The Norns Shield is a DIY hack Raspberry Pi You can buy, there are lots of makers. I mean, you can make it yourself if you've got the skills. You can buy them on Reverb, eBay, various other sorts of places. And a little bit cheaper than buying the official version. It's basically the same software and the same applications and so on. And if you're quite comfortable with there are a variety of kind of case designs, so I suppose if you want to kind of have something of the same aesthetic value as MONOME offer, then I guess you take the plunge. It's kind of good enough for me, and I really like it. Now, what I also have at the moment, the app that's running is called Awake, and what I also have here is the 16N Faderbank, which is also a DIY thing. Again, lots of makers. You can go onto GitHub and get all their schematics and so on if you really want to kind of build your own. Now, I've got it mapped to a number of parameters, to control parameters on the Norns. So moving from left to right, I'm not using these two faders. I haven't quite decided what they should be used for. This controls amplitude. This controls probability. Now, it's probability of a step firing. So you can see the step pattern at the top there and below. So it's a dual sequencer. So very low probability of a gate firing or a step, an event. Right about midway. Getting a bit more in there. Sort of, if you want it to be sort of reasonably constant but not too, not full on, 90% is kind of about good, and that's roughly about there. It's very approximate values because obviously, you know, this transmits MIDI, so MIDI is basically 127 or 128 individual values from 0 to 127, and the Norns is essentially scaling from 0 to 100, so you have to sort of scale the MIDI, the 128 values into 100 values for the Norns. That's kind of what we have here. So I'm not using these two. Let me do the other four, the block at the back here. So this one controls decay or release. You can make it quite percussive. Very short. This one's the filter. I'm going to open the filter up and bring the release down a little bit. This controls the pulse width. So you can go from 100% sort of pulse width so that the wave actually disappears, and likewise on the other side. You can just about hear it. And then anywhere in between. So roughly about 50%. So it's a nice tonal change. It's actually a really nice idea. And this is reverb. So it's quite nice to sort of have increase the reverb and then bring the gain down. Likewise. It's kind of the effect, really. So let's go to the middle bits. So the middle bits essentially control the first few steps of the dual sequences. So here, the white fader here, fader 5, controls the top sequencer in terms of its length. So you can see that it's changed to just one step, 2, 3, 4, 5, and all the way up to 8. I mean, they do 16 steps, but I'm not really interested in doing 16 steps. 8 is good enough, trust me. And it's roughly guessable, in terms of the fader travel. And then each of these controls the pitch of the first 3 steps. So this is step 1, step 2, step 3. I can't control the other 5 steps, let's say if we've got 8. But that's kind of enough to control the first 3, because you can create really interesting patterns. Likewise here, these 4 faders control the lower step sequencer. So it's exactly the same things. The number of steps, you can see it elongating just there, getting longer all the way up to 8 as 1. When it's 1, you can move the fader around. So this is step 1, step 2, step 3. What happens with the dual step sequencer is that the lower sequencer, the value, whatever value is at that step, is added to whatever is in the top sequencer. So that's the combined output. So when you have, say, currently we have 3 on the top sequencer. So if we have 2 here, you get a phasing effect, 3 against 2, right? So now it's 3 and 3. So at the moment it's 3 and 3. Once they're of equal value, the pattern doesn't really change. But when we make it 4, we get variations, right? And they phase, and over time they kind of come back into sync. I like the 2 and 3. This one as 5 was quite... Let's do this one. 5 up here I think was good. So that's 5 and 2. Bring some reverb. Let's do 3. I like this one. It's a bit kind of like Cora and Kalimba sort of effects. It's really nice. I can spend quite a long time on this app. And because of the unequal step lengths between the dual sequencers, you get these sort of shifting patterns. Changing the probability, bringing down the filter, increasing the release, which is here, changing the pulse width, bringing a bit more back in. I mean, to my mind, there are a number of sweet spots that you kind of hit. And even though I can only alter 3 steps of the first 3 steps, you can generate a lot of interesting patterns just by altering step lengths and step values. I'll increase the probability and bring that back up. Now the sequencers also have a randomizer that you can use. So you use these here pressing key 2, you can see it drops to the bottom sequencer, right? And when you click key 3, it randomizes the step values. So when you have 8, so you can institute a random change en masse and then start to work with them. And then use that as the basis for the next idea, whatever that is. And again, if we wanted to change the lower sequencer, K2, press K3, and then we get some randomizing. But obviously these faders are not automated, so they don't update, they don't kind of catch up. So you find yourself in a weird situation of trying to match the level. That's a nice sound. Gonna play with that one for a bit. So we've got 2 on the top and 3 on the bottom, and we could alter them. You kind of have to kind of roughly guess the relative values that you need to move to when you want to exchange steps. Like here, this is step 1 in the upper sequencer, this is step 1 in the lower sequencer. So you could, in theory, adjust them accordingly so they're roughly the same value, but then swap which sequencer they're addressing. So that's kind of an interesting application. So this is step 2. And it results in different melodic outputs, even though they are pretty much the same note value, but you actually end up with a different kind of melodic outcome. I think I missed it there, but you get the idea. Let's add 2 more here. So adjusting the pulse width. Bringing the reverb down. Let's change the steps. Very different melodic output. That's why, in some ways, having flexibility in terms of 8 steps for both sequences, rather than making use of the full 16, isn't really a big deal. mean, you kind of think you want to use all 16 steps, but really there's a lot more that you can achieve by using smaller modular type approach than sort of having 16 steps running continuously. Now, one of the things that you can do with this sort of stuff is that you can capture the output in your DAW. I mean, I tend to use Ableton, but you know, this isn't really specific to any DAW. You just need to capture it. You can kind of leave it sort of running and just jamming with it for quite a while. You know, some of my other streams are sort of an hour and a half just running on its own. But remember that it's very different depending on the number of steps. Each time you're going to get a slightly amended melodic output. You can see there where 2 and 2 doesn't really work. You really need something that is 3 and 2. Two and 4 straightens up again. Any number that they go into evenly together, the upper and lower sequencer, tends to result in this sort of non-changing sort of repetition. Make it 5. Swap them. It's quite easy to kind of make a semi-binary sort of output, depending on how accurate you feel that you can get this. Took a little while to establish itself. Changing the tone with the pulse width. Bringing the reverb down. Bringing the filter down a little bit. Changing the probability. You can see that's quite a pronounced change just from the top. That's at the full extent of the fader. This is it back to 100%. Probably about 85. It is a guess. Roughly 50%-ish. It's quite low probability, but high levels of reverb and sustain. Move the pulse width, bring the filter down ever so slightly. there we go. That's the MONOME Norns. This is the Norns shield, which means it's a DIY build. You can get them on Reverb and eBay. You can check out on the different kinds of forums and Facebook groups, and you'll find someone selling one of these. You can also find the 16N, the Faderbank here. Again, there are build documents on GitHub. You can build your own, or if you're not quite as skilled, you can get it from a builder, from someone who'll be making it. And there are builders all over, like the US and Europe and so on, where you'll be able to get this built. It's very easy to MIDI map. I'll do that in another video, but it's really easy to MIDI map. They've updated the firmware, the Teensy firmware, because it's a Teensy Arduino or Teensy Duino that they have in there. You can just see it lighting up. I guess that's it really. Well look, thank you very much for watching this. Do remember to like and subscribe. There are kind of lots of different types of videos. This is one of my first kind of live stream, sort of in the moment type ones, so I'm hoping it's okay. Alright, until next time, remember to like and subscribe.